West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, the first thing Donald Trump has to do is go to jail. For Donald Trump, the case of the state of Georgia versus Donald John Trump will begin in a jail, and it might eventually end in a jail. In Fulton County, the sheriff's office announced tonight that Donald Trump and all of his 18 accused co-conspirators will first be booked at the Rice Street Jail in Fulton County. The sheriff of Fulton County has said that Donald Trump will be fingerprinted and that he will be photographed and end up with a mugshot when he is booked at the Rice Street Jail. The sheriff noted that the jail is open 24/7 and all of the people indicted in what the indictment called Donald Trump's criminal enterprise are welcome to show up to their bookings at any time. No appointment necessary. To varying degrees, Donald Trump has been given special treatment in each one of his previous arrests and arraignments. So far, there has been no suggestion from the Fulton County Sheriff or District Attorney Fani Willis that Donald Trump will receive special treatment this time in the booking and arraignment procedure. This is the one. This is the case that tells the story more clearly than any other criminal case against Donald Trump. The story of exactly who Donald Trump is and was when he was, according to this indictment, committing crimes in the Oval Office. This is the one that historians will use to tell the story of Donald Trump's conspiracy to overturn the 2020 presidential election. This is the one that screenwriters and perhaps playwrights will use to tell that story. If you read only one indictment of Donald Trump, it really should be this indictment. It tells the story the way a well-written history book would tell the story, in clear, simple, chronological order, beginning with Donald Trump's lying speech at 2 a.m. on election night, quote, falsely declaring victory in the 2020 presidential election. Those of us watching that speech at that time knew that Donald Trump was lying. Neither candidate could honestly claim to have won the presidential election on election night, given the number of still uncounted votes in the key states. When we watched that speech, it appeared to be one of Donald Trump's standard issue lies, which are perfectly legal. But in this indictment, on page 20, we discover that a week before election night, Donald John Trump discussed a draft speech with unindicted co-conspirator individual 1 that falsely declared victory and falsely claimed voter fraud. The speech was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. That speech at 2 a.m. was, according to this indictment, the public launching of Donald Trump's criminal enterprise. The second action in the furtherance of the conspiracy involved Rudolph Giuliani and unindicted co-conspirator individual 2. The third action involved unindicted co-conspirator individual 3. The fourth action involved unindicted co-conspirator individual 4. There are a total of 30 unindicted co-conspirators, some of whom were in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. That means that the grand jury has evidence from unindicted co-conspirators who are cooperating with this prosecution of Donald Trump's criminal enterprise. Many of the fake electors in Georgia are unindicted co-conspirators who are cooperating with the prosecution, and the rest of the fake electors in Georgia have been indicted for impersonating a public officer, conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, forgery in the first degree, conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, and more. What Mike Pence called a gaggle of crackpot lawyers have all been indicted in this case. Rudolph Giuliani, John Eastman, Kenneth Chesbrough, Jeffrey Clark, Jenna Ellis. They are each facing multiple charges in the furtherance of the conspiracy. The conspiracy called Donald Trump's criminal enterprise. Rudolph Giuliani is 79 years old. He is contemplating the possibility tonight of spending the final years of his life in prison in Georgia, outside of the reach of a presidential pardon from the next Republican president of the United States. Our first guest tonight, Harry Litman, in his legal column in the Los Angeles Times, calls this indictment the most far-reaching and portentous response to Trump's assault on democracy. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has indicted Donald Trump individually for much of the same conduct described in the Georgia indictment as a criminal enterprise. Donald Trump's last White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, does not appear in Jack Smith's indictment, but Mark Meadows is the fourth listed defendant in the Georgia indictment. Mark Meadows is the first defendant in the case to legally respond to the indictment by today filing a request in federal court to move the Georgia case out of the Fulton County Courthouse to the jurisdiction of a federal judge. The federal judge who will consider that request is Steve C. Jones, who was appointed to the federal court by President Obama. The Georgia judge, who was randomly assigned the case in Fulton County, is the newest judge in Fulton County. Judge Scott McAfee was appointed by Republican Governor Brian Kemp to fill a vacancy and is now running for re-election to that judgeship in 2024 on the same schedule as the presidential election. Judge McAfee is a Republican who was a member of the Federalist Society in law school. Judge McAfee served as an assistant district attorney under the supervision of Fani Willis, who was then one of the senior assistant district attorneys in Fulton County. We now have a four-way race to a trial date in the four criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who was the first to indict Donald Trump, has a currently scheduled trial date of March 25th. District Attorney Bragg has said publicly that he would not use that date to stand in the way of one of the other prosecutions of Donald Trump, which he recognized as possibly more urgent cases. Today in Florida, Donald Trump's newest co-defendant in the espionage and obstruction of justice case was finally arraigned. The two defendants facing criminal charges with Donald Trump in Florida probably believe that there is virtually no chance of them being sentenced to prison, even if found guilty in that case, because the judge in the case was appointed by Donald Trump and has in the past issued extraordinarily favorable rulings for Donald Trump. And because there are no mandatory minimum sentences required in that case, it is fully within that federal judge's discretion to give no prison time to any of those defendants, even if found guilty. The prospect of prison time is the strongest pressure in convincing co-conspirators to cooperate with prosecutors. That pressure is virtually non-existent, possibly in the Florida case, but that pressure is much, much stronger in the Georgia case tonight, with 18 co-defendants of Donald Trump, each wondering how much prison time they could be facing in that case. None of Donald Trump's 18 accused co-conspirators in Georgia can just sit back and bet on Donald Trump winning the next presidential election and making that case go away, because the President of the United States has absolutely no power to intervene in any way in the Georgia criminal prosecution of Donald Trump's criminal enterprise.
It is Wednesday, the 16th of August of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our even more special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, because will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. And also because we didn't have a show yesterday because the power was obstructed all over the region, and that was no fun on one of the hottest days of the year in history here in Southern Oregon. Though I saw a heat index in Saudi Arabia, Qatar area, around that area, through the Gulf of Oman, 178. Ouch. And a dew point at 97. Now, I don't know if that means anything to you out there, but humans can't live in that. Yeah, so I guess if you're inside and you got air conditioning, fine. But if you're outside, good luck. Unbelievable. But it's normal. All right, just so you know, it's normal. These things happen, and there you go. It's kind of funny that the same people saying that this is all normal, don't worry about it, were the same ones who would pee upstream, pollute the water, then everybody gets diphtheria or whatever. Oh, let's use mercury and other kinds of weird solvents to take out the bank on the side of this waterway so we can look for precious minerals and gems. And they did. And then they whined and said, no, you're trying to take away our industry. You don't like capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's getting poisoned, and they got little stumps for arms coming out of their shoulders. You just don't like business. Wow. Okay. All right. Well, what are you going to do? Just let him get away with it? No, we can't. They have been making an assault on the truth for decades, and we shouldn't really act like it just started recently. It didn't start with Trump. Now, they may have created a Frankenstein. Maybe they are afraid. Look what we've wrought. Yeah, well, we warned you. And we actually have mechanisms in which to be sure and certain that the monster is caged and kept out of our midst. But the people who created the monster are still defending the monster because, well, they're getting their tax breaks. And my big question is, are they? Because I think the vast majority of the people who think they're getting tax breaks in the midst of this, no. I think they're aspirational. Someday I'll be rich enough so I can get a tax break. And in the meantime, I'm going to pee on everyone below me because that's the trickle-down theory. That's right. The trickle-down theory has now turned into a deluge, and they hate us. All of this is because what? They thought the hippies were going to take over and turn it into some sort of chaotic, anti-American hellhole? And what do we get? book bannings and book burnings, and women probably they're going to be burned at the stake next. And these ghouls will feed the fire with books. Feminist literature first. Burn these witches. Send them to hell. And then you look at the people passing judgment, the guys passing judgment on all these women, and you wonder, gee, I wonder why that guy's alone. Why is he lonely? Give me a break. Bunch of whiners. So anti-American, that really just... At least the America that we were taught to be, Sure, we rebelled against the more ridiculous... patriarchal aspects of it. But what happened to the strong silent type? I thought that was supposed to be like, something to aspire to. I want to be the strong silent type. Now everybody's a whiner. But they all think they're strong silent types. I'll give them that. They think they're the silent majority. I wish they were. These are the loudest whining... Ugh, Jesus Christ. Whine. Now, if they were just whining, it would be okay, but then they got to take it out on everybody, too. So, what do we blame it on? Do we have to spend our time blaming? Well, I like to, because, speculation about motivation is always a way of understanding what the hell is going on. And is it just a coincidence that the requirement to learn American civics in the schools arose around the same time these right-wing think tanks did? And now look where we are. People who have no idea what America's about, have no sense of loyalty to its traditions. And then if you ask them out on the street what you think of the Bill of Rights, they think it's a commie document, and we better not have that happen in America. Okay. Keep civics out of the schools, otherwise you might turn people into loving democracy. All right. I guess we're going to have our own brand of mobster here, a mix of the Sicilian New York mob and the Russian New York mob. How about that? There is some speculation that Rudy went after the New York Italian mob so he could bring his buddies from the Russian mob in. And is it any wonder that then, after 9/11, and Rudy was no longer mayor, he set up an anti-democratic shop to take down democracies in the emerging Soviet Union and turn them into autocracies run by mobsters? Russian mobsters? Okay. Well, you know what they say about these crooks. Like Rudy says, I was just defending Trump. I never in their wildest dreams think that I, as his lawyer, would ever be convicted or charged with a crime for just being his lawyer. No, you worked for anti-democratic lobby shops, psyop shops. You ran them. They were yours. You were in business with Manafort, Roger Stone, Lee Atwater, etc., to take down emerging democracies in the former Soviet bloc. Right after 9/11. Coincidence? And then he turned his sights on the United States of America because we don't want those dirty hippies taking over America. And look at these people. They're slimy, dirty, icky people. Every single one of them, even that pancake-faced orange monstrosity. Can you imagine what his pillows look like? Oh, my God, I hope they clean his face before he goes to bed. I've worked in hotels. It's not fun. Have to put up with that. Maybe I should give you a rundown on what we have in store for you. Since we missed yesterday, we're just going to pick up where we never picked up from yesterday. So I shall give you a rundown on what we do have in store for you. And at the top, that was Lawrence laying out how the Georgia indictment tells the story of exactly who Donald Trump is more clearly than the other indictments, as it lays out the actions of Trump's criminal enterprise. Then on the rest of the menu, a federal judge dismissed a lawsuit by two conservative groups to halt Biden's student debt relief for longtime borrowers. Well, that's interesting and good. The EPA is investigating how California manages its water following complaints from Native American tribes. And the Chinese spies who read State Department email also hacked a GOP congressman on the House Armed Services Committee. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Poland arrested two Russians on allegations of spreading propaganda for the Wagner Group. Or is it Wagner? And the Argentine peso plunged after an extreme rightist Trump admirer came first in the presidential primary vote. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and you know what to do and why. Because though we be small, we be mighty, and we be mighty resistors because of your generosity. Now, there have been those of you out there who have sent us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. And that helps us pay those bills and then fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance as the founders originally intended so many years ago. See how I mashed everything up? But all kidding aside, we do need your help, and we thank you for helping us. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, we're still there, even though he's trying to change it all. He may be going away for a while. Not right away, but that Ellen guy may be going away for a while. Just wait, you'll see. But you can also follow us on Mastodon, Spoutable, other places, and you can find Netroots Radio by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc. @Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before show time. That comes up automatically because I put it in the queue earlier. That's what I do. And so you can find the actual reportage. If you go to my social media feeds that I mentioned, you'll find the links to those show notes and links diaries on Daily Coast, and then be able to read the actual full articles. And sometimes we might add a few things or subtract just for narrative effect. Huh? You could also please pick up podcasts. Oh, first, follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. We'll make a more activated account on the other platforms soon, I promise. And now, most importantly, do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Just not Stitcher, because of SiriusXM. Damn them. Okay. Our first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Washington Post by Danielle Douglas Gabriel. A federal judge denied a bid by two conservative groups to block the Biden administration from canceling the federal student loans of more than 800,000 people who have been in repayment for more than 20 years. The Cato Institute and the Mackinac Center for Public Policy filed a lawsuit earlier this month, saying the administration violated federal law by failing to produce the forgiveness policy through the traditional rulemaking process and offer the public the opportunity to comment. The groups also claimed the policy would harm their recruitment efforts and asked the court to stop the federal government from canceling any debts as the case proceeds. Oh, you've got student loan debt? You shall be my indentured servant. Come on, kid. U.S. District Judge Thomas L. Ludington of the Eastern District of Michigan issued an 18-page order dismissing the case, concluding the groups lacks the standing to stop one of the administration's latest efforts to alleviate the burden of student debt.
We disagree with the court's conclusion regarding legal standing and are reviewing our legal options.
An attorney at the new Civil Liberties Alliance, which is representing the conservative groups in the lawsuit. Adam Beam of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. President Joe Biden's administration has agreed to investigate how California manages its water after some Native American tribes and environmental groups complained the state's policies are rooted in white supremacy. The EPA announced last week it would investigate the California State Water Resources Control Board, the board whose members are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state Senate, set rules for how to use much of the state's water, including 211,000 miles of rivers and streams. Federal law requires the board to review those rules every 3 years, but the board has not kept up with that timeline for the San Francisco Bay, Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta estuary. The estuary is one of the largest in the country and is home to threatened species of fish. It also irrigates California's powerful agriculture industry while providing drinking water to 25 million people. The tribes say the state is relying on outdated rules that have led to overgrowths of toxic algae and cyanobacteria, which prevent the Single Springs Band of Miwok Indians at the Winnemem-Winto tribe from performing their cultural, religious, and subsistence practices. Little Manila Rising, a nonprofit based in Stockton, says the algae bloom spread like a lime green film across the surface of the water, giving off a smell of slowly rotting grass and preventing communities of color from using the waterways to escape the heat during the summer. California's water is governed by a complex system based on seniority that does not recognize Native American tribes' historic uses of the state's rivers and streams. Attempts to update the water rules usually end up in court, a process that can take a decade or more to resolve. The board has delayed reviewing the rules in part because Newsom's administration has been privately negotiating with big water agencies on what the rules should be. Newsom wants the water agencies to voluntarily agree on those rules to avoid lawsuits. Last year, the negotiations had a breakthrough when some of the state's largest water agencies signed an agreement with state and federal officials. But Native American tribes and other communities of color say they were not included in the negotiations. Joseph Men of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The suspected Chinese hackers who forged Microsoft customer identities to read the emails of State Department employees also obtained the personal and political emails of Representative Don Bacon, a moderate Republican from Nebraska on the House Armed Services Committee. Bacon tweeted on Monday that he had been notified by the FBI that his emails were hacked by Chinese spies who took advantage of a Microsoft mistake for a month between mid-May and mid-June, which lines up with when investigators said the other breaches occurred. Bacon said that he would work overtime to make sure that Taiwan receives all of the billions of dollars in U.S. weaponry that it has ordered. Government and private sources told the Post a month ago that victims of the hacking included Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, unnamed State Department employees, a human rights advocate, and think tanks. They also said that a congressional staffer had also been targeted. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, the whole kit and caboodle. Sometimes Disney feels like that really rich couple who can afford the clowns, magicians, musicians, popcorn cart, bouncy house, ice cream bar, pony rides, and carousel when, after all is said and done, it's still just your 6-year-old's birthday party. In that vein, the sheer metric ton of talent that they've thrown at their second Haunted Mansion movie is astounding. First, they got Katie Dippold to write it. She wrote the Bullock McCarthy buddy film The Heat and the all-female Ghostbusters. But wait, she also wrote over 30 episodes of the much-lauded Parks and Rec. To direct it, they got Justin Simien, the creator of Dear White People. And if you're asking what are these two doing here, well, Simien, at least, is packing his cast with actors of color. Rosario Dawson, Tiffany Haddish, Lakeith Stanfield, which for this role feels like swatting a fly with a cannon. Beyond that, there's Danny DeVito and Owen Wilson and Jamie Lee Curtis and Jared Leto and so much makeup you can't even tell it's Jared Leto. Joe Coy is a blink-and-you-miss-him bartender. Hassan Minhaj has a small bit. Mary Lou Henner is in a crowd scene. Winona Ryder has an uncredited tiny role, and she's great. They're all great. But did you need Winona Ryder for that? And with all this talent, you'd think that the movie would feel more special. Instead, it feels like a lot of hands on the wheel. They want to have something kids can enjoy. They want something adults can like. They want meta-jokes for people who think they're too hip to like this movie. They want a family in jeopardy story. They want a moving personal emotional story. They want an aspirational story. They want action. They want off-kilter humor. They want to celebrate science, but also faith and superstition. They want to reference the theme park ride, make product placements, and rep other Disney properties. Oh, and they want it to be scary. Well, scary-ish. And none of these parts are done badly. It's just Haunted Mansion feels like a movie put together from a kit. And you and yours can have a lot of fun making something from a kit. It can look cool. It's just not as special as your grandma's spice cake. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
So the apothecaries founded this space as somewhere where they could train their students in how to identify medicinal plants from harmful plants, plants that can kill and cure, so to speak.
In London's neighbourhood of Chelsea, next to the River Thames and enclosed by a tall brick wall, is a collection of poisonous plants that can kill you. There are also plants that can treat you when you're sick, and even plants that many of our modern medicines are derived from. I'm Shayla Love, and you're listening to Scientific American's Science Quickly. Today, we're paying a visit to the Chelsea Physic Garden, one of the oldest botanical gardens in Europe, with 4 acres dedicated to the ancient science of healing. When I first walk inside, it looks like a typical garden. There's a gravel path that crunches under my feet and twists and turns through crowded plant beds. But after glancing at the map, it becomes clear I'm in a different kind of garden. On my right is a poison bed where the plant signs also include a skull and crossbones.
Maybe we can go to the poisonous plants because I feel like that's probably a big draw.
Yeah.
You don't see that often in botanical gardens.
That's adjacent to the Garden of Useful Plants, which contains plants associated with scientific developments of the past and present.
Science journalist was like, ooh, the medical plants. It just was like a perfect overlap of my interest.
They are devoted to different parts of the body, the heart, nervous system, stomach.
This, here we've got hemlock.
That's Frances Sampaio.
I'm Deputy Director of Visitor Experience at Chelsea Physic Garden.
In the poison bed, Frances is showing me hemlock, a highly poisonous herbaceous flowering plant.
You can see this kind of like purple stem. And in the last 3 weeks, this has gone from having all white flowers in small clusters into, kind of the later part of its life cycle. And it's really dangerous to consume.
A hemlock drink, as some of you probably know, is what killed Socrates. Right next to the hemlock is an edible plant called sweet cicely. The two look uncomfortably alike.
Yeah, so the leaves are really similar.
In an earlier part of their life cycle, both cicely and hemlock have white flowers. The side-by-side placement of these two plants is intentional. It's a representation of the Physic Garden's original purpose, to teach young apothecary apprentices how to tell the difference between toxic and non-toxic plants.
The garden was founded in 1673 on what used to be a kind of market garden, part of Chelsea.
At this time, this area of London was like the suburbs. It wasn't central London at all. The garden was originally founded by the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries.
For them to learn their craft, they needed to be able to recognize plants, know where to collect them, how to collect them, make sure they're not getting the poisonous bits, not belladonna in the wrong amounts, that sort of thing.
That's Jonathan Holliday, master of the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries.
And obviously this is before photography, before kind of Google ident, so it was really important that people had that plant knowledge of what they were using.
Next, Frances shows me the poisonous plant henbane, paired with a cautionary tale of 4 children who accidentally ate henbane instead of hazelnuts, putting them to sleep for 2 days and nights. Then we see a plant called giant hogweed. There are signs warning that even touching it can cause the skin to blister when exposed to the sun. The Worshipful Society of Apothecaries was given a lease on the garden in 1722 from Sir Hans Sloane, who did his medical training in it. The apothecary's rent was just £5 per year, with the promise to provide the Royal Society with plants. And
the other requisite was that this land would only be used as a garden for medicinal purposes, for teaching.
Over time, the garden was taken over by the City Parochial Foundation. And then it became an independent charity in the 1980s when it opened to the public for the first time. Over the years, it's had some notable visitors, such as
Agatha Christie, who was a famous crime writer. She studied with the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries and took their exams.
Christie lived nearby in Chelsea and was a frequent visitor to the garden. In 1917, she passed what was called the assistance examination, or a test to be what we might call a pharmacy technician today. With these credentials, she could give out medicine during World War I and World War II.
But it gave her a huge amount of plant knowledge and how to correctly dose things.
And for Christie's novels, it provided an intimate knowledge of poisons.
And in her books, she writes about plant poisons more than any other author, really, at that time, writing crime stories.
The garden also hosts hundreds of plants that our modern medicines are derived from, and it demonstrates the lesson that while many plants can be a poison at a higher dose, they can be a treatment at a lower one.
So we've got poppies here. So opiums obviously use pain relief.
Next to the motherwort plant is this description from Nicholas Culpeper, a botanist and physician who translated knowledge about plants from Latin into English. It reads, "It makes women joyful mothers of children and settles their wombs, as they should be." And there's an infamous plant connected to witchcraft.
Belladonna.
During the Renaissance, women in Italy were rumored to have made a solution from the belladonna berry and put droplets of it into their eyes.
It was said to make their pupils dilate so that they would look more beautiful. So belladonna, beautiful woman.
In ophthalmology, a synthesized form of the same chemical can still be used to help dilate the pupils.
But today, plants are not really on the medical syllabus.
Up until the 1970s, chemistry students still came to the garden as part of their training, but then it stopped being a requirement. Although visitors still learn about plants here today, the focus has shifted to something more general, our relationship to plants and nature in the modern medical age.
And so we'll have a lot of people come to the garden and they might say, "Oh, I'm on this medicine. I never knew that it came from a plant." There are some really amazing natural remedies that come from plants, and we're really lucky that actually today, we can have an aspirin tablet. We don't have to chew on willow bark to get that salicin that's going to give us that pain relief that we need. So both have their benefits and their merits.
And nature can be its own form of medicine. I started working in my community garden in Brooklyn last year, and the couple of hours a week I spend with my hands in the dirt clears my mind. What we grow isn't medicine, but rather vegetables and fruits to feed our neighbors. Whenever I'm visiting a city, if I have the time, I'll keep an eye out for a garden. The bigger the city, the better the trip. Gardens provide an oasis away from that urban din. When you're deep in the center of one, the only noises you hear around you are the buzzing of bees and swishing of leaves. But ultimately, nature is healing not because it's separate from us, but because of our relation to it and how we've always used plants to modify, help, or harm our body in some way.
So like you can learn about plants, and then also thinking about the importance of being in nature and how, just as being a green space, we almost provide a medicinal space for people because it's all about well-being.
Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tulika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leong. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. For more in-depth science news and features, go to scientificamerican.com. And if you like the show, give us a rating or review. For Science Quickly, I'm Shayla Love. See you next time.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
When your political opponents push extremist public policies that would be disastrous for America, should you wring your hands in dread or applaud? Consider Project 2025, put together by former Trump officials and the Koch brothers network of billionaire plutocrats. Their strategy is to win the presidency next year by demonizing all environmental protections and promising to halt all national efforts to cope with the obvious crises of climate change. Their proposals include repealing regulations that curb fossil fuel pollution, terminating our nation's transition to renewable energy, shutting down all environmental protection agencies, encouraging more oil and gas use, and promoting the deadly delusion that global warming is not a real problem. Moreover, they intend to implement Project 2025 in the first 180 days of a right-wing Republican presidential term, obviously anticipating that Donald Trump will be that president. "We're not tinkering at the edges," brags a far-out right-wing group that instigated the scheme. "We are writing a battle plan and we are marshaling our forces." They've already drawn up a list of agencies and policies they'll begin eliminating on day one, and they've readied a list of some 20,000 right-wing henchmen to put on the federal payroll immediately to enforce their plan. If this sounds ludicrous, it is, but it's actually happening, for the Republican Party has decided to be ludicrous. As the director of Project 2025 told the New York Times, this is where the conservative movement sits at this time. This is Jim Hightower saying, maybe, but it damn sure won't sit well with the American people, who are presently suffering the hellish ravages of our rapidly overheating climate. Indeed, here's a great chance for Democrats to demonstrate their bipartisan spirit by doing all they can to publicize the Republicans' let it burn global warming policy. Howdy-ho, folks, and thanks for tuning in to my Hightower radio commentaries. And guess what? There's even more Hightower waiting for you online. Subscribers to my Substack newsletter, Jim Hightower's Lowdown, get commentaries, articles, interviews with progressive sparklies, live events, historical nuggets, and more. Go to jimhightower.substack.com to sign up, and you'll get more. That's jimhightower.substack.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day that the U.S. Congress passed the National Apprenticeship Act. It was also known as the Fitzgerald Act. The purpose of the act was to, quote, formulate and promote the furtherance of labor standards necessary to safeguard the welfare of apprentices. Apprentices are workers learning a skill set. They are typically paid less than skilled workers or journeymen during the course of their training. Apprenticeship programs are especially found in the building trades, where learning skills like plumbing or electrical work might take years of dedicated training. But before the protections of the 1937 Act, there was no national standard governing apprenticeship programs in the United States. This led some apprentices to be exploited. In 1911, Wisconsin became the first state to pass legislation to structure the apprentice system. In the 1920s, multiple labor unions advocated for national apprentice standards to promote fairness and safety for workers. Recognizing the need for national apprentice guidelines, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt commissioned a committee to study the issue. They were tasked with developing training standards for apprenticeship programs. The 1937 law gave the committee the authority to complete their job. The Committee on Apprentice Training became a permanent part of the U.S. Department of Labor. The Bureau of Apprenticeship works with state governments to ensure the fair treatment of apprentices. Today, apprenticeship programs provide classroom and on-the-job training to help develop a skilled labor force. In 2015, 52,500 participants graduated from registered apprenticeship programs. Nearly 500,000 workers participated in apprentice training programs, learning skills that will build their financial security.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 71 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting record highs once again, somewhere between 112 and 115 here at the mothership. Oh my. Sunny to partly cloudy throughout the day, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Some clouds overnight with lows in the mid-70s, not nearly cool enough as you know. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then mainly cloudy tomorrow with near record high temperatures in the upper 90s to the low 100s. Winds out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated low in our little hamlet of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region just bumped into the moderate range and now stands at 57 parts per million. And that daytime UV index, though it remains high, has ticked down to level 7. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.01 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles. And relative humidity is dropping. Right now it's at 58%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's the Weather Underground. London is 77 degrees and fair. Paris is 80 and partly cloudy. Rome is 87 with thunder in the vicinity. Kabul is 75 and clear. Kyiv is 86 and fair. Hong Kong is 85 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 82 and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 46 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 76 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. At the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. 2 Russian citizens have been arrested on allegations of spreading propaganda for Russia's Wagner mercenary group, Poland's security authorities said. The Internal Security Agency, or ABW, said that the men had been acting on behalf of Russia's secret services and were distributing leaflets in Warsaw and Krakow advocating joining the mercenaries. They were arrested on allegations of working for a foreign intelligence agency and in participation in an organized group having terrorist goals. If convicted, they could face up to 10 years in prison. In recent months, Poland has arrested 22 people suspected of spying for Russia or for its ally Belarus, in what Warsaw sees as part of a hybrid war on Poland due to its support for Ukraine in the war against Russia's aggression.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Daniel Politi of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Argentine peso plunged after an anti-establishment candidate who admires Trump came first in primary elections that will help determine the country's next president. Javier Milei rocked Argentina's political establishment by receiving the biggest share of primary votes for presidential candidates in the October general election to decide who leads a nation battered by economic woes. Milei, age 52, wants to replace the peso with the dollar and says that Argentina's central bank should be abolished. He has said that climate change is a lie and has characterized sex education as a ploy to destroy the family. He also said that the sale of human organs should be legal. Gun ownership is severely restricted in Argentina. Milei proposes the deregulation of the legal market for weapons and the protection of its legitimate and responsible use by the citizens, according to its party's electoral platform. Where have we heard that before? Argentina's government decided to devalue the local currency by 20% early on Monday morning after the surprising Sunday showing. 2 mainstream political coalitions have traded power for a decade in Argentina. The country is now the latest where voters have picked an outsider candidate to express anger against the status quo. Operators were watching nervously Monday as the value of the peso also decreased in the parallel or blue market, dropping 12% by early afternoon. Milei said the government was trying to blame his victory for the depreciation of the currency. The drop in the value of the peso means that already high inflation will accelerate, making getting to the end of the month even harder for ordinary people. Argentina requires that citizens vote with a symbolic financial penalty for not voting, and 69% of the country's 35 million voters went to the polls, each choosing candidates for positions ranging from local councilman to president. It marked the lowest participation for presidential primaries since the current system was set up in 2009. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.